Okay, today we're going to talk about external communication and how you can do it in Make. So basically, most of the modules in Make, in fact, executes the external communication, and for that communication we use the APIs, right? But in case if you don't have the module for particular action for your application, or if you want to make a totally custom API call, you can use modules such as HTTP modules, right? And this will be a topic of today's video. So how to use HTTP modules and how to do the API calls in Make. Okay, so to communicate and get the data from outside of your system. This is basically one of the basic things that we do all the time when I Make, right? So get data, transform it, process, and send somewhere else. So we start with the general module, which calls Make API request, and then we'll go over all the rest. So basically, most of these modules will do the same thing, just with some restriction or exist some things for your convenience, such as these four modules, right? The rest is just do almost the same thing, just just a part of function that does the HTTP module. So we start with the HTTP then. So to do a call, right, we will need the API doc, and that is not included in a current program, right? I mean, we assume that you already know how to do HTTP calls, right? How to read the docs and everything else. So if you won't be able to do it, right, I would recommend you the API Bootcamp, the program that I have already, or just try to find this. It's not that complicated, right? And you can find and learn how to read, let's say, the CURL syntax, which is pretty, easy to do, and we going to see some of these options right now also. So this is the API documentation for the Airtable, which is one of the most common thing, right? We use for tables, besides probably the Google Sheet. And let's start with the HTTP request in general. So we have some URL, right? Usually that contains some, may contain some parameters in it. In the case of our URL in Airtable, it, as you see, contains the version of API, the some path, which might be called as a like a method, right? And some parameters that comes after question mark. So usually, you saw this many times in your UTM, and even here in the same Make, you see we have the parameter in the URL, which is folder, which literally means the folder ID in this case, right? So let's start with the super basic API calls. As you see, the Airtable API allows us to do a call to some address, and we have to use a header, as they stated here, right? And we have a body of the call response, right? So to remind you, we just spoken about the URL and the syntax of it, right? So we have some URL and the question mark where we start to have our parameters, right? So after question mark, always go to parameters, and to be exact, in Make, these parameters has to be URL encoded, definitely. It won't encode these parameters for you unless you will use query string. So that's what it means. You see this %20, it's a URL encoded thing, right? This URL encoded space, technically. So if you will use such URL, right, so that parameter has to be encoded. So if I will going to paste this URL here, so that should be %20 or URL encoded thing. So you can either go and Google and encode it manually. Just encode URL will give you a ton of URL encoders, and there you will be able to do it. So technically, all stories, and with a %20 in the middle means that it was the space in here, right? So if I will decode, which is opposite action, This will give me a space. So to encode it will give us %20. So this process actually kind of can be done further and further. So make sure you do it just once to avoid like double URL encoding. And with this all set, our parameters in URL field in HTTP module has to be URL encoded. So you can't just put %20 with like a space and assume that something good will happen. So system simply will cut that parameter up to the point where it can cut, or will tell you that this is invalid URL if they won't be able to trim it up to the space. Okay, we'll say the invalid character or so. So that's how it should work if we put the URL this way. Another option is to just put your parameters. And again, we said about the encode URL, so you may use encode URL in here for each of the parameters. So encode URL function will do exactly the same thing, that will encode the URL parameters. So either or, you put parameter with a %20 means URL encoded, right, for space, because it might be different. Special character that has to be URL encoded, or you use the function for it. And another option for it is to use query string. So it's the same thing, literally. Either you will put it in URL here, or you will put the parameter in query string, but the query string will do URL encoding for you automatically. So make sure you don't put URL encoded parameter in query strings, because you will get double URL encoded option. So with this set, I'm going to remove this U from here. We'll keep it in query string, and that still will work. So let's actually finish this up with another option, because Airtable allows us to send authentication either in a header, or if you will read the API doc, you will see that you can also do it with the API key. So this would work exactly like this. So you just add the API key as another parameter to your request. So I'm going to add it in here, just like this. Definitely no equal sign. So these two guys will be added. The order doesn't matter. And we can do our call to get the result. So we got the 200, which is great, and we got the result. So two things I want to mention at once here. So 200 and the code for the state that you got from the server, right? So by default, make HTTP call module will evaluate all responses which are not 200 and 300 as non-error. So if you will do something wrong, just let's say I will remove this one, which would definitely break our URL, the module will be still executed successfully, right? But the result here will say you 404 and something. So if you need to make the calls which are not 2 and 300 status code invalid, you have to switch this parameter, so that will return you an error in the particular module. So just remember about add. So that if you didn't set this parameter and the module executes successfully, it means nothing until you get the correct result, right, from the server. So as you see, our parameters, which you actually can see on input, right, in here in query strings. So as you may see, that still goes without space, but in fact, it sends correctly and server can parse it. So if we go to console, where you actually should be able to see your API calls, that's something that you will see. So our query string will be sent just like this. Server will able to read this parameter and encode them properly, while the part that we have in the URL will be sent as a kind of our endpoint as a URL. So again, two ways to do it. So I may just put my view as and equal to something that will be URL encoded. Let's just use this URL encoded. I always forget about this because I encode URL. Yeah, so encode lowercase encode URL. You can just click on here if you want. All stories with a space, we go into URL encode. There is no space here. It's all good. That's how you check the spaces, right, with the cursor on your keyboard, for example. So we can run it. That's if I remove it from there, it's actually, it takes it from both places. So this might work, but I'm going to remove it, and this will send the parameters here, and I will still have correct response. So and another thing, this was a code, the second is response, right? So you see I got the JSON here, right? And again, it comes as it should come if we don't parse it. We have a headers that comes from a server that allows us to read, means the HTTP module, to read and understand what exactly server sends. So if it comes with some content type such as JSON or XML, right, we are able to parse it with the HTTP module in most of the cases. So you just do parse option here, and that will be converted into a structure instead of text. So that's for your convenience. If you need to forward this result somewhere else, then you definitely won't parse it. But in most cases, you will parse it to get some parameters such as this, right? So you see, you got the parameters and it works just fine. So I can now add another module and use it here. So if I have any other module, I can see my results, right, as a variables and map and use it in following modules. So that's the basic that we have, right? And now let's go over the other things. So I'm going to switch to, let's say, create a record, which gives us a post request. So we will also now will utilize the headers. So as you see here, we have a specification for post call. With Airtable API, it's really easy just because it gives you exact data that you need to send in here, right, for your table. And again, that's how you read the CURL. So you have the capital X, which says you about the type of the call. If there is no call, it will be GET. In our case, it's a post, so I definitely will change my type to post. And I have the URL that I have to have as my URL for the post request. So we'll just replace this one with the URL. The method, you see you have several of them, definitely. We will change to post accordingly to API doc. And capital H means for us headers. So we just have key and value pairs for headers, and that is a separate section in our module. So my authorization and API token with the bearer, as you can see here, comes in my header now. So there's, again, the API of Airtable API doc allows you to says us about that we can use both, but for my purpose here, I will just did the API call to illustrate you, and now I use the headers to show you that it can be how to use actually headers, right? Then this we don't need anymore because I use my authorization in here, and my body type will determine this header. So the content type we determine using the body type we select here. For definitely for post calls, for the get calls, we don't have the body. They will be just it will be just ignored. So doesn't really matter what you select here. So I can use URL encoded form or multi-part, because these guys will form a little bit different structure of the field. So if I select the form field, right, so it will give me array which I can put with the parameters in here, right? So because it's a URL form encoded type, for my multi-part, it will give me the fields not only with the text key pair value, but also with the files, right? So if you have multi-part where you want to send the file, so you can select this option to easily map your binary file name and key for it in here. But in this particular example, we're going to use just JSON, and this allows you to select most common, such as text, JSON, XML, HTML, or the custom. So if you need to have a custom content type, you can just select a custom and put whatever you like here, and this will be your content, right, request. So we will touch it in a second. So this JSON, right, I'm going to select. So with this, I'm okay with my content type header, and I can just copy the data, which will be my JSON text in here, right, and just paste it in a content request. So what is important to remember here is that your field for body, by default in HTTP module, won't parse a structure. So that means you have to have a JSON text here, not just a variable with a collection or so from previous module. So just remember it. And if you need to convert it to JSON, then please go and use a special module. So if you have a structure from previous module, such as, for example, this, the same one, right? So to not create anything else. So for to convert them back and forth, you can use JSON to transform to JSON. So here you may take your piece of a JSON, which can be our data collection, for example, right, and convert it. So that would convert my structure, which we call a structure here, right, like a variables, into a text. So this is in case if you need to prepare a JSON and you don't have it, the JSON text. Okay, so let's try to do a post call with our authorization and JSON body in it to see how it works. So we got actually error. This might happen just because of some you see we got this one. It will be the escaped, but still my fail for a couple of reasons, right? So for that I would just go with a JSON lint, right, to see and validate my JSON, make sure that it works. Okay, so you see that literally our Airtable doc gave us invalid JSON. Okay, so we have these several characters that make it invalid. I'm not sure how to quickly solve it. So basically that is kind of already escaped special character, I would say. So if I would just replace it with this, it should not be a trouble with reading it. So you see we pass it already. So that's just like as doc gives you like some weird double escape JSON kind of thing. So if I just remove these guys, this is fine. Even with this one, it should work. This actually is correct, right? So we escaped the double quotes here. So as you see, I had invalid JSON, and that's why my module failed, right, to execute. Even though, again, I switched back my evaluation, right, to no, so that module was executed successfully, but code was incorrect. So I put, as I hope, a valid JSON, and hope to test it once again. So we got our 200, and it means that our table, which is actually was a stories, right, got new record. So let's go to our Airtable, to stories. Let me see. We actually worked with it was product planning and then stories, right? So product launch, product planning and our stories, which actually in a form view, all stories. Yeah, that's it. So we probably just added these two guys. I would just try to get a new view with just a general one. Okay, so I have 48, 49. Let's see if we will add a couple of more for nodes, blogs, something else. That should be it. And we add this to app-based stories, so we can double check our syntax. So this is app, which is for IUJ, and stories, and we add records with a node. Will put test, capital test 1, and capital test 2 in another node. If we have, so we don't have a node. Several points, facet, epic, and so what? So what? Test 2. Also that, right? Okay. So these two guys were updated. We can run it and try to find our tests in Airtable. I do see that I got 2 more, right? So probably my test 2 in here, and we get a node, so this is in here. And because Airtable works in real time, we will be able to see added 2 more, 52, 53, so it's all good. We're just fine for us. That's how you do the post call, right? And these are what features we have here in our module. So if you need to do a multi-part with some special, right? As I said before, you may just build the something like this if you need to do the multi-part, right? So you just have text such as this in your request, and you can do either with a multi-part data like this, but if you have like some custom text already, right, as this I have, right, so you may just set it to custom, just a row, then the custom, then set your header, including your separator, right? And that's it. And then just put the text with a binary or whatever in your request content. Let's see what we have in our advanced settings, because there are several of them, and some of them might be really important for us. So these two guys, username and user password, will help us to do a basic authorization call. So it means if you have the basic authorization, which to remind you will be looking like an authorization header of basic space, and here will be your base 64 encoded user and password, right? Just like this. So you can do it either by setting the authorization header and putting your thing here, basic with a base 64, or simply add your user and a password in these corresponding 2 fields. So that's literally why we have these 2 fields for the timeout, because when you do a call, server might take some time to process results and give you the response, right? So by default, it's a 40 seconds. So max what you can do until the module will say timeout will be the 300 of seconds. So literally 5 minutes per call. This is hard limit that you may do in here with the HTTP call module. The thing with the sharing cookies, literally will return you the cookies. In case if you work with the browser, this will be basically it. So let's just go to whatever web page we have, because we also can do definitely just pretend that we kind of a browser, right, and just call our URL. So no parameters, nothing here, just the URL. So that will return us HTTP page, right, with just HTTP code. And so by default, it, as you see, doesn't return me cookie headers, but does return my headers, right? So if I go to this one to set my cookies, that call will return also my cookies if I have anything to return. So I may just try to go with the Airtable won't be authorized probably, but something like, I don't know, same Google. You got a point. Usually it will be the authorized call if the URL saves something in your browser, or try to save something in your browser, means return the header set cookies. Then we go into read this with our cookies header, right? And then you can use this data into your further calls, because sometimes you need to authorize somewhere, and the authorization will be cookies, or you will try to parse some page, right? So that's why you need the cookies. For follow all redirects will help you to literally follow all redirects, because sometimes if you go to a page that redirects you, and with this we will create such redirect intentionally using the webhook. So say I have some webhook in here, and I want to have my webhook response, which will be a location with a code 302. So this will be location with the same Google to say, right? So I will then have my So I will listen my webhook call, and I disable the follow redirect, so that should work actually. So we will see, and I will do the get call without following the redirect. So to see what will happen, my browser will return me 302 and will return me the my location header, which is here. Okay, but if I will follow the redirect, so you may guess what will happen, right? So follow redirects, or follow all redirects, because we may have like a sequence, right, of several redirects here and there. So we'll run this once again to listen new. We'll execute that. So that will return me already Google page, because I literally took this header for location and reuse it as my kind of purpose of a call, and got this data already from the Google page. So this is illustration, or like the test, the presentation of the like how works the follow redirect option for our things. So we had actually skipped a couple of options, such as self-certificate. Again, this some page may require from you, or a service might require from you to do a call with a certificate, right? So you can use this certificate, and to extract it, if you have just a key, you may put it here. If you want to extract it, you may use the private key option, or certificate, file, and password to parse it and get the only key here. So our follow redirect and reject the connection will check actually if our self-signed certificate. So again, this mostly for the websites and for some servers also, right, where we use self-signed certificate. So if you will put it to yes, it will reject connection if certificate is incorrect, right? So this will validate the certificate. With a no, it will simply ignore the certificate issue and will just give you the result. So serialization, as you see, for several parameters that you might have in your URL, such as keys for our parameters. So you see we have two foos here. If the serialization is enabled, make handles multiple values at the same query URL, string parameters. So we'll convert it to that type of thing. So some services use these type of like arrays, right, for parameters. So you may just enable or disable serialization to switch back and forth with these two parameters. So hope that's kind of more or less understandable. And if you will face such type of parameters, you will remember. So if you need to serialize them, like create kind of array with these two options, you may just switch back and forth. So then the accept encoding, this just requests the compressed content. This again just how you form your API call, and use mutual TLS. So these are all options for your API call. And again, as I said, it was advanced module for HTTP. These three guys, it's literally the same thing, but just with a couple of options for authorization. So make basic authorization, as you may understand, we'll use and utilize. We don't have the user password here. You remember that we use for base. So we have kind of, it calls credentials, but in fact it's a base connection. So you can set your base header once with a user and a password here, and just reuse it later, as you see in my example, right? So you select something here and you put URL and you go and do your same API call with all functions using your same header. So this is just for security purposes. You put it in here and no one see it even from your team or yourself, right? You just reuse the same base connection, base authorization connection. Same thing for make API call. So as you see here, you just put the API key. So you define where the API key goes. So it's literally some static parameter, right, that you can reuse. You remember our Airtable. So that means I can either, if it's a query string, I will just put my API key in here. I will specify the key parameter. In my case, it was API key, if I'm not mistaken, right, for Airtable that we had a notification. So this will be the key, right? Because it's literally a parameter and the value for it. And if it will be the header, then I will have my key as in the documentation will be the authorization, right? Just like this. So authorization, and the API key will be definitely everything that we have inside, like as a value for my header. That's it. So, and then, oh, sorry, just opposite. So you see this was kind of hidden. So your authorization goes this way, right? So authorization. And here you just kind of copy and hide your key. Okay. And same thing for the API key. So you won't miss, because the password or means value, right? Secret something will be always, hashed or presented with these dots. And that's it. So and then you save it and then you do a call. So as you see here, I have my API keys that I have for make API, save it, right? So I can just go and reuse it, for example, for my URL. So if we will take this, that should work for us. I don't remember exactly the path for a call, but it doesn't work. So you just go and find the make API doc, and use the description to make it happen. So my connection, say list connections, this might be it. So I have to have API and team ID as my required parameters, at least these two guys. So I can just copy up to this. So you see the required parameter, only team ID. The rest is optional. And I can go to my thing, enter this part. So my team is 25. So I have API with two team ID equal to 25. And this my API. That should work. Okay, and as you see, still, maybe just old API key, but you got a point, right? And that's how it works. That's how it works and how you use the API key connection. So that was our API key. The certificate again will be the third from these guys. And you remember the certificate parameter where you put your name and you retrieve the certificate or private key using the several options. So again, just to have them here. And all these guys actually you see will be stored in the same keys section. So all these API keys, all this, kind of basic authorization and so they will be stored in the same section, which is similar to our connections. So this was about all these guys. We have to definitely mention my API out 2, which is kind of relatively complex to set it up. Okay, so make out call. It's basically the same module, right? The only difference, as usually, will be a connection. So in this case, we use out2 connection, which is relatively complex thing, and it's definitely outside of the current scope of the current video. But in general, this what you have here will be two options to use: only either authorization code or implicit, right? Where you specify the parameters. And you have literally your authorized URL, token URL, you have your scopes that can be added here. You have a separator for your scopes. So make sure if you select the one that use your API, it will be just a space. So like scope 1, then scope 2, and so on. So that will be space definitely, right? If you have such thing as API docs, you have space. If you just comma separated scopes mentioned in there, so you select the comma, super simple, and just remember it. So client and a secret again, and authorization parameters and the rest parameters. So authorization parameters, this will be used during the authorize call. If you have any additional, such as, I don't know, like consent and for example, true or something like this. Then access token parameters, this will be used when you do second call for token, right? Again, just read your API docs. And refresh token. So custom headers, this is the headers. So these are URL parameters, these are headers that will be used. So some APIs required you to have same authorize and say basic header, right? So you just remember that you then have to provide the basic authorization header that will be used, for example, for the token call. That's it. And last but not least, the bearer. So some APIs might have something specific instead of bearer token. And here we even have the option to where to send the token, which will be like, you see, the either token or bearer word and so on. So which will be the name. That's basically it. the settings for connection, which again is a little bit outside of this thing, but the module itself works exactly the same as we had before. So rest of the modules, these are just like super basic things which we use for like starting users usually, such as get file, right? So get file will be just regular get API call with a super simple things to, you know, to add. So you may just use same make API call, regular module with a get request, and it will return you exactly the same. So that's just, again, simplified for the basic users. Then resolve target URL, same thing that we spoken with you when we discussed it, that you remember, right? The call to our second kind of API. So that's exactly the same thing, nothing complex, in fact. So let me just clean this up a bit. Okay, and this will be about the resolve a target URL. So you just may use put this one and resolve all URLs, but in fact the same option you have in almost all modules, right? With follow redirects and follow all redirects. So that's what does follow redirects module, which was added at the time where we didn't have this option in regular HTTP call. The retrieve headers, as you understand, will just get the headers for you from the some module, which is literally kind of iterator for the headers array. Again, you can just get the information from these headers as you need with the get map functions, or use regular iterator. There's just an iterator, and again, it's a kind of outdated version of the module. Not outdated, but like almost no one use it. You know, I'm not sure if you will need to iterate headers from your module. So that's almost everything about the HTTP modules. And what I want to mention will be a fact which almost any application in Make has own API call module. So say we have, say, Jira, right? And we have make API call module. So that module allow you to use the connection that you have, right? And will literally utilize a part of our HTTP module, such as URL, right? The method, because you need option maybe to send get and post calls. And so headers also, right? Because by default, as you see, it says to JSON, but you may need different header something. And actually, the use case will be for Smartsheet, where you can upload the file, right? So there are more tools, and this is a good example because you have just the body here. I want to mention the query strings also, because again, it's same as a HTTP module. You can add query strings, or you can use the parameters in the URL. One thing about URL here, in most of the cases, you just deal with the relative path. So you don't put the full URL, you just put the part of the URL, because we have basic for your application already. Because in case of Jira, say we have some custom URL all the time, right? So you just add this part. And in case of Smartsheet, I want to show you one thing so you to remember. In most of the cases, it's not a rule, but by default, if you won't set anything for your module, your data here might be considered as a structure. I believe it's a text. I believe it should be considered as a JSON text. So this is important to remember and understand. So we in most of the cases we will post a JSONs, right? But what you need to remember and understand that type can accept only one parameter. It will be either text or the structure. Some modules, including the Smartsheet, for example, make API call, will have the option to switch. So here you have a type, right? And this type is a text, JSON, binary, URL encoded, and so on. By JSON, literally, we mean a structure. So if it's a JSON, you have to put some kind of collection like this, right? While by the text, we mean a JSON text. It's a little bit confusing, but it is how it is. And what you need to remember, if you don't have an option, as in, let's say, Jira case, right? So Jira will presume that we will have only JSON text, I believe, right? So only JSON text. If you need to map some variable, you're already stuck and you won't be able to do it with a Jira in this particular case, right? So you need to either request it from the support or just do make API call using our HTTP modules, right? So that's just you to remember what to do with this one. And again, you can use now, because you know how it works in more details, you can play and test and understand and build the scenarios that will interact and move the data between your scenarios using this simple feature, right? So you have the API call in here, as you see, right? So I send data to my second scenario, which uses webhook. And that's how, and using the, say, post call with a JSON, right, will be the most common option to communicate your two of your scenarios. So you simply posting the data from here, from the HTTP, right, to your webhook, and you respond the webhook with some parameters information. But remember, if you want to be able to parse this data properly, always set content type header for a JSON, so system will always understand that that's what you sent won't be just a binary something, but will be a text that can be parsed. So for that, you have to have a header of content type JSON, right? So if you send JSON, it will be JSON. If you send a text, just use content type HTML text, for example, right? So system will get whatever you send, and then you can reuse it later. So this will be an option for your thing. And remember that you have 40 seconds only, and it's not discussable, not negotiable, and not changeable. You have 40 seconds only to reply with your webhook response in here. So you don't have 300 seconds to process something. So you have to reply in 40 seconds, because in another case, the system will just reply with the 200 and accept it. So this is it, guys, about the external communication, which actually you see involves an internal communication also between scenarios in your Make accounts, right? And this how you can utilize HTTP modules to work with the external data in Make. We're going to talk later about on how to monitor and do it better. I mean, all this log stuff. But that will be more about the monitoring and the troubleshooting and work with the error handling stuff for our scenarios. So see you soon.